there is no better business in the world than Google. Single-handedly, par excellence, the most incredible money-making machine that's ever been created. And a close second, as it turns out, is Microsoft.
Unbelievable. I mean,
which is now the most valuable company in the world, greater than Apple.
Well, and Friedberg's been saying this on the podcast forever, but just to give people an idea, Q3 revenue at Google was up 41% year over year to $65 billion in a quarter.
And by the way, that is high margin.
High margin.
The incremental revenue on the core Google products operated at an incremental 50% EBITDA margin.
Sick.
And they just adjusted their CapEx depreciation amortization schedule because they realized that their computers that they use in their data centers last 4 years instead of 3, and the networking equipment lasts 5 years instead of 3. So they're like, and I've been saying this since the beginning because I worked at Google, and Urs is still there, and he runs all the data centers and the networking infrastructure. When I worked at Google, there was this amazing project where we built a 10,000, I mean, we didn't build it, they built it, a 10,000 port switch called Firehose, which helped increase the throughput of the data centers and have these massively parallelized indexing and production servers. And there was so much investment made from the beginning in building the infrastructure stack. The flywheel continues to spin faster and faster and faster. And here they are building their own servers, building their own racks, their own data centers. Literally they have their own fiber across the oceans. Literally the most vertically integrated business in history, with a moat that no one will ever be able to catch up on. And I read all these nonsense comments on the internet about people being like, why doesn't someone else go after search? It's so crazy to me. People fail to recognize that what we see is the tip of the iceberg at Google. And this flywheel is built by layers and layers of monopolistic, in a good way, monopolistic technical advantages that they've built into this business over the period of the past 2 decades. And it is extraordinary beyond anything we've ever seen in human history how well this commercial enterprise is run. And the reinvestment of capital has been extraordinary. If you look at YouTube in the quarter, YouTube generated, this is insanity. YouTube is now operating at a nearly $30 billion revenue run rate. And that's just like pure margin incremental revenue for Google, layered on, built off of the same ad network that they were originally running on Google. Obviously, they have a different ad team now at YouTube. But YouTube now has more revenue than Netflix and is growing at likely 40 to 60% year-over-year revenue growth rate, whereas Netflix is, considered one of the FANG stocks, one of the top stocks. And Netflix is only growing at 22%.
Sure, remove Netflix and just put Google twice. It should be.
And then you look at Google Cloud.
YouTube in there on its own.
And Google Cloud is now operating at a $20 billion run rate. And, they can just throw these services on top of all these flywheels that they've built, and they become massive enterprises unto themselves. I mean, it is a behemoth that is effectively not a tax in a bad way, but a tax on the internet, because they are core infrastructure to service almost everything that we all consume and use over the internet.
Yeah, but they give it to everybody for free, and they build the internet for everybody.
They have been extremely smart about competitive pricing. As we saw recently, they dropped the commission in the Play Store to 15%. If I'm making an app and I'm giving Apple 30%, now I give Google 15%. I'm more inclined to promote my Android app, and that's going to affect users. And, they're putting out this Pixel 6 phone that looks like an incredible piece of equipment that's cheaper than the iPhone.
They're an incredible company.
Everything.
They are so incredibly well run at the top. Sundar is an incredible CEO, and they're running a money printing press at Amphitheater Parkway in Mountain View. I was going to say, Jason, to your point, I was talking to somebody, and one really interesting thing that this organization did was a couple of years ago, they basically went long Google and Microsoft, and they shorted Apple, Amazon, and Facebook against it. And I asked them why. And they said, it's the best inflation hedge we could come up with at massive scale that could work in a way where, we're long growth, but we're hedged where, the types of supply constraints that could come in and, kick us in the ass would never affect Microsoft and Google the same way that it would affect Apple and Amazon, which, by the way, in their earnings results, they said, right? Amazon has huge issues on the supply chain side. Apple has huge issues on the supply chain side.
Amazon was up 15%. They missed their numbers. Although Amazon Web Services is up 40% year over year, also on a big number, $16 billion in AWS revenue for Q3. So that as a standalone company is now on a
What did you guys think about Meta?
60 billion. Oh my God. I mean, did you watch the video? I watched the whole thing.
I watched 2 minutes of it and then I stopped watching.
PTSD. I mean, it's basically you have Facebook in the face of all of the things, all the times they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, saying, this is going to be the new world. But instead of us doing everything wrong and screwing the users and their privacy and democracy and creating strife in the world, this time we're going to make it open source. This time we're going to build a coalition and partnership. And this time it's going to be awesome. And it's like a dystopian SNL skit where Zuckerberg is describing the future. And he literally describes how proud he is that you're going to be able to play Grand Theft Auto. And Nick Clegg is like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. This time we're going to bring all the regulators and the scientists in to tell us how to build it. And we'll have consensus of how to build the future. And you're like, did you just say that everybody in 3D is going to be in a virtual space beating each other up with bats and guns and killing police officers in Grand Theft Auto? Luckily, they didn't show a clip of it. But it was basically Zuckerberg taking credit for every single virtual reality or augmented reality thing you've seen over the last 20 years. He literally took everything from education to HoloLens to, poker games. And he took basically credit that this is going to be the future and that instead of this time it being a closed ecosystem, it would be an open one that supports NFTs. And don't worry this time. I think any developer who puts any amount of their effort into supporting in any way Zuckerberg's view of the metaverse is crazy when they could do it on a distributed, decentralized, crypto-based, open source platform. You do not want to give Zuckerberg any more power. And if there is even a 10 or 20% chance that this is the next big compute platform, Zuckerberg needs to be stopped from doing it by the market.
Wow. J-Cal.
I think you're crazy. I think you've lost your mind.
I haven't.
Yeah, I think you've lost your mind. Oh my God. I have a counter argument too. Okay, David, you start.
Well, I don't even know if I could categorize what I'm about to say as a counter argument. I don't even know how to counter that. All I would say.
It's insanity.
All I would say is, look, I think it's really great that Facebook is spending all this R&D money on metaverse, virtual reality. Oculus is a really cool product. I think, Jason, you've made the observation that people use it once, say it's the coolest thing ever, and never use it again. There is that element to it. They have to solve that. Using Oculus for the first time was one of the most unique experiences I've ever had with computing, but I admit I don't use it anymore. It's just not something I
Better or worse than Pornhub the first time?
But in any event, look, I think the fact
that's his way of saying worse.
I think that the fact that Facebook wants to do all this R&D in virtual reality, great. Changing the name of the company, however, at this point in time, it felt to me like a little bit like Philip Morris changing his name to Altria Group. And by the way, I don't buy the idea that Facebook is like cigarettes. I don't believe that at all. I don't think it's bad for people in the way that it's been hyped up to be.
But you're saying this is a PR marketing strategy.
But it feels like they're running from their name. And basically it's almost like saying, this whole business of social networking has been so sullied that we need to appear to be a diversified portfolio of companies, of which social networking is just one small piece.
A deprecating piece.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't really buy into that. And I think if that was any part of their motivation, it's a mistake. Because I think the only thing Facebook should do about all these accusations is get up on their hind legs and fight. Because I think like all these leaks from the so-called whistleblower, I think this is a completely orchestrated political hit. And they should just fight back and push back on it. I think the dangers of social networking have been vastly exaggerated. So it seems to me like they're buying into that nonsense by running from their name. So I at least would not have done this right now. I would have won that battle. And then if it was still important to change their name, then I would have changed the name.
Well, they're losing young people at an extraordinary rate on Facebook. U.S. teenagers were projected to decrease by 45% over the next 2 years. Young adults between the ages of 20 and 30
they're all going to Insta.
Were expected to decline by 4%. Or TikTok, I think, is probably more accurate.
Yeah, TikTok is big, yeah.
Yeah, during that same time frame via a leaked memo obtained by
the
Verge.
way, I mean, how in the world is Facebook or Instagram more dangerous than TikTok? I don't get it.
No, TikTok is deranged. But by the way, our Stan making our Henry Bellcaster of TikTok is reporting that we have like millions of views over there. So there's some rogue.
Did I say that how much I love TikTok?
I love TikTok.
He's building our audience. We're connecting with Gen Z finally.
You're
Go TikTok.
TikTok. Go CCP.
You're right. The TikTok account, there's an all-in TikTok account done by a fan, and we got like 2 million views in the last week. It is absolutely bonkers.
No, we just passed Rachel Maddow and a bunch of folks.
Yeah, we're more popular than all of MSNBC.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on. Way to set the benchmark. Friedberg, do you
guys remember a year ago Larry Ellison negotiated this deal with Trump to buy TikTok
for like
brilliant.
Nothing? Yeah, he's going to throw in Lanai. Friedberg is
and Masa-san was supposed to be on TikTok's board.
Yeah, that's, by the way, Xi Jinping is on Lanai right now, and Larry Ellison got TikTok. Yeah. Fair trade.
Nobody talks about the Billy that Ellison kicked into Tesla right before.
I was going to mention that.
He's such a boss.
He made like $12 billion.
15
billion.
He's such a boss.
He put $1 billion investment, joined the board,
such a boss.
Told everyone,
zip.
Wow.
talk all the smack you want about this guy, but he's landing spaceships on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean. What are you doing?
He'll figure it out.
And he'll figure it out. And 15x. It's insane.
But wait, I have one question for Friedberg. Is Zuckerberg pulling a Larry Page, i.e., somebody else becomes CEO of the Facebook collection of companies, and then he becomes the chief product officer, and then doesn't have to go to Senate hearings?
No, I think he's way more active and driven in terms of product direction than Larry ever was. So I don't think they're the same person, and I wouldn't liken these two.
But what about the meta strategy of changing the company name?
By the way, my prediction was that I should have done this on the pod a month ago. I said they were going to change their name to Meta. I think that at some point, as you diversify these businesses away from your core, and you have this core engine driving the business, you have to make it look like these businesses can and will operate independently. While they might get some leverage off of one another and one might feed into the other, they need to be able to operate independently from a kind of public perception, operating and management perspective. That's what Alphabet did. It's a natural progression of states as you start to do things that are too far distinguished from one another. And so it feels reasonable. I think, is this a whole like PR rebranding? Maybe to some extent that's helpful, but I do think that this idea that we need to do more than we're doing today and we need to make a big hard cold bet on it is what this represents. Now, the important psychological question, is he doing it out of a matter of defense? Meaning, like, does this signal fear about the core business? Or is it about ambition and aggression and rebets on new opportunities and emerging opportunities that he thinks? And that's the big debate that I think is kind of going on right now, is how much, often when you see people make big moves like this, it's either out of greed or out of fear. And I think some people are asking the question, how much should we be afraid of the core business being eroded based on his making this sort of a big bet?
You think this could perpetuate that, or it's a bit of a tell that this is happening?
A tell.
I got
right.
it. Okay.
And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying that's the question, right?
Right.
And that's the question a lot of people are asking. Is this a tell that the core business is at serious risk?
Well, and he's putting $10 billion into it this year.
For example, this Apple, ad revenue business, I think, is climbing by billions of dollars, while Facebook's core business is being affected by the cookie tracking policy change on Apple iOS. So at the same time that Apple's reaping these benefits from the changes that they've made in iOS, people don't really have great visibility into how much it's really affecting Facebook's ad revenue at this point. And this could be, as you point out, the tell that maybe things aren't that good, and he needs to diversify and he needs to make a big aggressive bet elsewhere. So, we'll see. I mean,
important question, Chamath. Are we going to celebrate the birth of both your and Friedberg's daughters with a poker game? By gambling?
Yes. Do you want me to give you my thoughts on Meta, or no, you don't care?
No, it's a joke. Can you take paternity to go to?
I got a board meeting. I got to go. Bye.
All right. For the Queen of Quinoa.
Wait. Don't you want to know what I think? I think on the Meta thing, I think the risk is if Google and Apple take the hardware costs to zero, because I think there's an incentive in a highly fragmented ecosystem. You have to remember, when Apple introduced the iPhone, there was nothing that came before it. So it was completely groundbreaking. And I think what Facebook has to figure out is how to make their VR experience so revolutionary that it attracts developers. And in the meantime, if Apple and Google figure out how to kind of give it away for free and just kind of make it a low cost hardware game where everything else, Jason, as you say, is this kind of open source thing where it's like a browser,
Yeah.
right? Where everything just exists in a DeFi kind of
Yeah,
world,
like the web and the internet.
then it's a little bit more problematic for all the money spent. That's what they have to figure out. If
Do
they
you
can
think,
figure that out,
Sachs, it's going to be VR or AR? What wins the day with consumers?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, they're very different experiences.
both can win. But
If
win what
we're
I
talking
think is the
20
question.
years from now, which one will be used more? Or 10 years from now, 10 to 20 years from now, which one will make more money, be more relevant, be more utilized?
Well, I mean, AR, the dream there is that you wear these glasses that have like the Terminator view, where it's like scanning the world and giving information. You'll never forget anyone's name again, stuff like that. That would be kind of useful, maybe. VR, I think, is more about immersion. It's really like a gaming experience, I think, at least now.
I think it's all about AR. Basically, what he was saying there, he was talking about VR. I think VR lets you make the worlds, and then AR lets you experience them concurrently with the real world. And it's the same tools and libraries and kits. As a developer, making it for VR, AR is going to be pretty, I think, seamless. And so I think Apple has skipped VR on purpose, and they're going to AR. I think Google is basically going to go directly to AR. And then where does that leave? And then Microsoft already has HoloLens that they've been investing in heavily, and I think they got the biggest lead that at least we publicly know about. So I think it's going to be a race for who can get AR to work, and VR is just like kind of a waypoint on the way there.
There's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sure that people will want to check out of the real world for some amount of their life, but they'll probably also want to be in the real world for some part of their life. And at some point, maybe if those two things merge, that distinction won't matter as much. And I think if the experience is compelling enough, it could happen.
Well, I mean, if you think about us playing poker on one of those poker apps, if we could put our glasses on, sit in our room and see each other at a poker table, like if Bogut wanted to play from Australia and he was, projected into the seat on the game and we all saw them there with glasses, AR glasses, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Sure.
Be able to, have two of the people at the game be projected in, as it were. Could be, especially if it was Diego. I mean, that would be pretty great. I mean, I'm saying for the good of the game. I did a tweet where I said, listen, VR, people leave it on the shelf, and Paul Malucky and a bunch of people got in my face about it. And then we had like actually really good discussion. And I said, well, what about serious gamers? Because I'm talking about serious gamers. They all buy it and then they never use it. And they said, yeah, it's not for serious gamers. I said, okay, well, what about iPad gamers and casual gamers and Bejeweled and Candy Crush? They're like, oh yeah, they're not interested in it. And I'm like, well, who are the gamers then? Is it the intense ones or the casual ones? They said, no, there's a new category. The number one game like Rec Room, Beat Saber, and golf are like crushing it with 1 million users a month in some cases. You know what they all have in common? They're physical activities where you get some amount of exercise, and it would be very difficult to coordinate in the real world.
I know, but Jason, when you look at things like Axie Infinity, where there are play to earn movements that are happening in sort of this layer 3 kind of DeFi world, where you're getting paid to basically play games, that could be a job, and then you will spend 8 to 10 hours in a metaverse of some sort. So these things are very possible.
I find it so dystopian.
That's true, but I'm sure that our parents find some parts of our lifestyle dystopian, and we find certain parts of our kids' lives dystopian. It's just what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. All right, everybody.